Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Circular Economy Week 2022 event. We will be starting in a few minutes. Just give people a couple more minutes to join. Bear with us. Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning. Welcome to this Circular Economy Week 2022 event, hosted by ReLondon on behalf of London's Food Flagship Initiative. My name's Rachel Sharp. I'm going to be hosting the event this morning. I am a Circular Economy Advisor at ReLondon. ReLondon, for those of you that don't know, is a partnership between the Mayor of London and London's local authorities. We work in London to reduce waste, increase recycling, and accelerate London's transition to a low carbon circular economy. So for the next hour and a half, we are going to be focusing on food. We've got a fantastic lineup for you this morning, 8 guest speakers, 8 of London's circular food pioneers, all of whom will be showcasing the really innovative work that they're doing in London to help reduce waste and carbon emissions from London's food system. During the presentations, we encourage you to put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So that's the Q&A box as opposed to the chat box. We'll be monitoring this throughout the event, and there will be moments when we will put your questions to our fantastic lineup of speakers. So before we dive in and hear from the first of our guest speakers this morning, I'm really pleased to introduce my colleague, Jean Billont. Jean is ReLondon's food lead and a senior business advisor, and he's going to give a short presentation setting the scene for you this morning on the emissions associated with London's food system. Over to you, Jean.
Thanks, Rachel. Morning, everyone. So welcome first, and it's really great to see so many of you today to hear about this great project in London happening, like the Circular Food Pioneer Project. So we're really, really pleased to have all of these amazing speakers today. So I will be just introducing the Food Flagship Initiative and kind of setting the scene in terms of the key kind of environmental hotspot and where the biggest kind of challenges lies when we speak about food system and circular economy. So first, the Food Flagship Initiative is a partnership between the Mayor of London, ReLondon, and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And our main kind of objective is to lead the transition to a low carbon circular economy in the food sector. And what we mean by circular economy in the food sector, our vision is to have a city where everyone enjoys food that is sustainably produced, deeply valued, and never wasted. And we have 3 main pillars that kind of build this circular economy for food. So the first one is sourcing foods grown using agroecological practices and locally when possible. The second one is around diets, so kind of increasing prevalence of healthy food menus and items. And the third one is all about kind of food waste and eliminating all avoidable food waste and then recycling unavoidable food waste back into the economy or back into productive uses. And how we want to achieve that, we have two main work streams. One is to design and deliver ambitious evidence-based policies and interventions. And the second is to form a community of key players in the food system, so across the supply chain, leading this circular economy transition. So for the evidence-based policy, we need the evidence, right? And we did this research. So it was took us about a year and a half to collect all the data, and we published a report at COP 26 in Glasgow in November, called the London's Food Footprint, and I encourage you to have a read. But basically, we mapped all the flows of foods in London, so understanding what kind of foods was entering in the city. So like splitting it by different food types, meats, vegetable, dairy products, etc. And then we mapped the food flows across the supply chain, understanding where the food was being wasted. So for example, how much was being wasted at processing and manufacturing stage, how much was wasted in the hospitality sector, and how much was wasted by households. And then we linked that to greenhouse gases emission. So what you can see in the red, although it's really small, and as a time of presentation where I see everyone going like this, so we need to speak to a graphic designer to not cause neck pain to everyone. But what you see at the top of it is just the greenhouse gases emission. So it allowed us basically to understand where the biggest hotspots were in our food system. And I'll share some of the key findings with you. So we found that the London food system was emitting 15.5 million tons of CO2 equivalent emission every year. So that's about 10% of London's total emission, and that's the same as about 1.8 million houses in terms of their energy consumption. What was quite striking is the fact that 78% of the emissions caused by of London food system occurs outside of London. So that's kind of at the farming stage, land use, all the emissions during the farming, or for the cattle and animals. And another striking figure is that 1/3 of all the food produced for London's food consumption is lost or wasted. 67% of that amount is edible, which is really insane when you think about it, and just 0.5% is redistributed. So here there's a huge gap and a huge opportunity as well to kind of redistribute, waste less and then redistribute more food. So some other key findings. So about 6.5 million tons of food are produced for London's consumption, and only 1% of the food is produced in London or in the peri-urban area. So again, like a big challenge and opportunity to raise that figure. The largest kind of producer of food waste is our households, with 931,000 tons, but followed quite closely by all the kind of early stage, so like farming and logistics and food waste that is happening outside of the city, so about 836,000 tons. Another striking finding is that meats represent only 5% of the food by mass, but about close to 30% of all the food emission. So it's much bigger important in terms of emission. And the last one is that most of the food is consumed at home, so about 86%. So once we have this kind of understanding the hotspot, we can also, and that's what we did, try to look at the leverage points. So how we, as a kind of a city, but all the stakeholders, can collectively reduce that level of emissions. And we identified three key leverage points. So the first one is around like meat reduction and like kind of increasing plant-based diets. And we saw that by reducing meat by 70%, we could reduce overall emission, like food emission, by 20%. So it's like a really big part of the emissions. Same with food waste. By reducing food loss and waste by 50%, we could reduce consumption-based emissions by 10.5%. And last but not, I mean, yeah, less in terms of amount, but there's some other benefits is recycling. So we can also reduce emission through better kind of recycling and looping back in the system, but much lower than the meat reduction and food waste. Just to say, we're not able to model the impact of sourcing food grown using agroecological practices because of the lack of data that we have in London. So we're not able to calculate that for this specific research. So once we kind of understand these leverage points, and once we understood them, we could kind of work with the Mayor of London, with the GLA, with the London boroughs and colleagues at London to develop a range of initiatives and policies that could kind of really tackle those hotspots. And we have like 15 projects, I think something like this around food and consumption-based emission at the moment. So a lot is going on. But I'll just speak about some of them. So we are working, for example, on procurement. My colleague Rachel is leading on a working group with boroughs to help them kind of, again, like change diets and reduce waste in schools and also for all the foods that they procure in the borough. We are working with boroughs in infrastructure to make sure that all the boroughs provide a separate food waste collection. We are doing a lot of work on awareness raising. So we have a campaign for young people called Food Wave, and we're developing a new campaign that will be live by probably the end of the year or early next year, a pan-London campaign on food and consumption-based emission. And we raised already £250,000 for this campaign, and we're hoping to do more. So really doing like a lot of noise around food and the emission. And then some work with universities, for example. So getting universities, we have a meeting tomorrow with 23 universities to get some voluntary agreements on, again, food emissions. And then doing some work on training and advisory supports. So that's all about evidence-based policies, but we kind of are really aware that there's so much we can do. The power of the Mayor of London, the boroughs, and London are limited. If we want to see the change that we are kind of seeing in the leverage scenario, leverage points, we'll need everyone in the food system to work together towards that vision. So that's why we want to form this community of key stakeholders across supply chain to work together. And the kind of thing we are doing, we are convening a roundtable by the end of the year with the largest food businesses. So the Mayor of London will be convening that roundtable to develop ambitious projects in London, again, on food waste, on diets, and on sourcing of foods. And one key thing that I mean, we're all here today to hear about is those pioneer projects. So something we're really keen is to really support and foster the projects that are existing or like that want to be launched. So showing what kind of different stakeholders are doing to achieve the three pillars and recognize them and support them and foster them. So we're really pleased to hear today 8 of those 9 demonstration projects. So you can have a look on our website to see all of them. So now I'll hand over back to Rachel. And if you have any questions about this presentation of the data, you can ask those during the next Q&A sessions that will be after the first 4 presentations. Over to you, Rachel.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jean, for setting the scene for us there. Some really, really striking findings in there. So as Jean said, now we're going to move on and hear from 8 of London's circular food innovators. about their work to make a low carbon circular economy for food a reality in London. And they're all working across those leverage points highlighted by Jean in his presentation. And as Jean said, they've all been recognised as official circular food pioneer projects by the Food Flagship Initiative. We've got eight people who are going to talk today. We're going to group them into 3 cohorts with a gap between cohorts for questions. So again, we encourage you while you're listening to the presentations to pop any questions that emerge into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, and Jean will be monitoring that Q&A and will field the questions during those designated Q&A sessions. So without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Letitia Walker, Head of Impact at Kitche, and Lauren McAloon, who's the Head of Growth at OLIO. Kitche and OLIO, for those of you that don't know, are free mobile apps to help citizens reduce their food waste. And Letitia and Lauren are going to kick us off with a joint presentation on the work they're doing to demonstrate how targeted promotion of these apps in the London Borough of Bexley can help reduce waste at a very local level. This is a project that ReLondon is really excited about. It's a project that's really important to us. We initiated it and we're funding it as we believe very strongly in the power of collaboration between circular economy startups and local authorities. So over to you, Lauren and Letitia, to tell us more.
Thank you, Rachel. Can everyone see the screen? Because I can't see the presentation. Is it good?
Letitia, it says you've started screen sharing, but we can't see your screen yet.
It says to me, Lauren's screen sharing, hopefully it will pop up.
Do you want to have another go, Lauren? You started screen sharing.
It's telling me it's paused. Let me try one last time.
Go. Otherwise, we might be able to drive it from our end.
I think
what happens if you double click, Lauren?
It worked in the tech rehearsal.
No, I can't see any reason why it isn't working. It says it's paused, so it might be. Do
you want to unshare your screen and our event tech team will try and drive it behind the scenes? If you say, yeah, perfect. So we'll drive it from our side, Lauren. If you just say next slide, please.
Okay, cool.
We'll drive it for you. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Rachel. Can we go, I think we were going to go up 2 slides, no, to the very top of the presentation, because I was going to talk a bit. ReLondon gave me a few slides to add in at the front, so I'm just going to talk also for them. And I'm also aware that we don't have much time, so sorry if I'm rushing and trying to squeeze everything in. But a little bit of context about the project. So it was funded by ReLondon, and the aim of the project was to see how food waste apps and innovative tech like Kitche and OLIO can reduce food waste at a local level. And the grant funding was to pay for targeted communications by the apps, as well as monitoring and a compositional food waste analysis at the beginning and end of the project. And we had a borough application process, and the London Borough of Bexley was selected based on what they could commit to the project. So a little bit about Bexley. Next slide, please. They're a unitary London borough with 250,000 residents and just shy of 100,000 households. And so they have separate food waste recycling and general waste collections. And next slide, please. OLIO and Kitche, we ran our projects independently. So we had different schedules, different comms channels, but yeah, we were running them alongside each other. So just to give a little background on Kitche and who we are, next slide, please. We're a free home food waste app, and we focus on food waste behaviour change and prevention. So this is largely what distinguishes us from other tech in the space, and we're not focusing on redistribution and reuse like our friends at OLIO. So that's like the big difference between us. Next slide, please. So how does Kitche work? So we have a great range of exciting and really innovative features that help our users track and manage their food wastes. So for instance, they can receive reminders based on food category, they can search recipes using food they have, they get weekly reports and much, much more. And a really important part of Kitche is our data. So we collect very, very detailed data on people's food waste behaviour, and we use this data to drive our app developments and further behaviour change with our partners. So next slide. So I've largely summarised the project earlier, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but yes, food waste reduction at a local level. And we were each given £10,000 to run our comms and reporting. So Kitche started with just 11 Bexley users. So our app is still really new. We haven't done any large marketing campaigns. So this was a really interesting opportunity to see how far this money could stretch when there was virtually no brand awareness in the area. Next slide, please. So here's a summary of our initial project plan. So what we decided to do was split the project over 2 phases with a 5-week interval where we could use our learnings from phase 1, see what worked, and then apply that to phase 2. And phase 1 was about driving brand awareness, while phase 2 was about driving download and engagement. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of our communications from phase 1. So we planned to spend most budget on digital marketing, but as you see, we also had billboards. That's Alex, our co-founder and COO, and we did other outreach, like our chef Dan. We've got an in-house chef, and he did a live cooking class for Food Waste Action Week. Next slide, please. So whilst we found that in phase 1 there was a sharp increase in downloads and also a below average wasted food rate, the cost per install was basically a lot higher than we expected and had previously experienced. So we decided to pause digital marketing and cut phase 1 short and move towards more traditional marketing techniques in phase 2. Next slide. We also wanted to introduce a competition incentive to engage our users. So we re-planned the whole of phase 2, moved away from digital marketing, and we wanted to offer up something different, planned on using events, magazines, flyering. This was our new budget breakdown. So we saved most of the budget from phase 1 to put into phase 2. Next slide, please. So these are some of the communications and artwork, and we've just restarted the communications last week. So we've just restarted phase 2. We're still very much in the middle of the project, and we've already seen a sharp rise in installs, which is really exciting. So just to sum up, because I've got to hand over to Lauren. Next slide, please. What are our learnings so far? So we demonstrated that we can drive engagement and downloads, though digital marketing may not always be cost effective and suitable for these highly localized campaigns. And we also found that brand awareness does take time to build. So it didn't just happen in the month that we were doing our digital marketing campaigns. But we hope to find that including an incentive, using a wider range of channels, we'll be able to continue to see an increase at a higher rate and lower cost. And whilst we found that these results will prove to be useful for future partnerships, we've also found that working with other councils, who at the moment we're working with Essex and Buckinghamshire, that each area is very unique and we have very different findings in those areas, so that we need to continue learning and sharing the knowledge to optimise campaigns, communications, and essentially drive food waste reduction in the local area. Now I'm going to hand over to Lauren, who's going to cover OLIO as part of the project.
Great, thanks. Hi everyone, I'm Lauren, Head of Growth at OLIO. Next slide. What is OLIO? So OLIO is a community-driven app at its heart that tackles food waste in the home. So our kind of biggest competitor, we like to say, is the bin in the house. So it's all of the food that you would typically think is about to go off, you're going on holiday, you know you're not going to get through, and it goes to waste in the bin. Now, next slide. We typically tackle this in 2 ways. So we have a community to community side of the app, which is where you and your neighbours will simply take a photo of any food in your house, or it could be, you know, a corporate work event, anything where it's about to go to waste. Pop it onto OLIO for free, and your neighbours can easily request it, and you arrange a doorstep pickup or a communal place pickup. The other side of the app is what we call our food waste hero side. This is B2C to C. So we partner with stores like Tesco and Pret, and every day we have thousands of food waste hero volunteers who go and collect food that would otherwise be thrown out by these large companies. They do the same as you or I would. They take photos of it, they pop it on the app for free, and then their local neighbours and community can simply request the item and pick up for free as well. Next slide. So we are much further along than Kitche. We started in 2015. We have about 6 million users globally, which is quite a nice vanity metric because not all of the 6 million are saving food, I hasten to add. And we've got some incredible, results achieved so far. But in terms of how OLIO internally thinks of itself, despite this great progress and clear signs that neighbours want to save food and the sharing economy is kind of very much thriving, we feel like there's still a huge amount of learning and progress to be made around the barriers to sharing food between communities as well. Next slide. So the goal with Bexley was to see if by partnering with a commercial business who already has some brand awareness, we could drive down food waste in the home. Next slide. So our project ran for 9 weeks, covering April and May. We had a £10,000 budget. And all of the activities was very much supported by London and Bexley, but owned by OLIO. And here's an example of one of our bus stop ads. Next slide. So what was our strategy? Well, we already had just under 10,000 OLIOers signed up in Bexley, but only 8% of them had opened the app in the past 30 days, and only 139 of them had shared in the past 30 days. It's worth pointing out here that OLIO tackles waste of all kinds. So we're focusing here on food waste, but our users do share household items such as books or child's clothes that they would otherwise go to waste, go to a charity shop. So it's very much product and food waste, but we're focusing on food waste here. So initially we wanted to see how many of those dormant users we could re-engage. And then phase 2 was around driving new users of OLIO. Next slide. Okay, so this is the most unattractive slide you'll ever see, but basically it covers a range of activity that we did over the 8 weeks. All of the light blue stuff is OLIO driven stuff. Bexley did support us with some free for OLIO paid bus stop placements and mentions in newsletter and on their social media. We typically focused on paid digital ads, so Facebook and Google, CRM, and we did a door-to-door leaflet drop as well. Next slide. And there is a breakdown of where we spent most of our money. So you'll see that digital ads took up about 2/3 of the budget, and that is in keeping with OLIO's main channel of acquiring new users outside of word of mouth. Next slide. There's some lovely pictures. Our brand and marketing team also kind of jumped on the bandwagon, and we were very, very happy to hear that Bexley Borough Council were supportive as of placing bin stickers on the recyclable waste bins. So that's in the bottom right. Next slide. So this slide I've kept in deliberately because I didn't want to share the figures kind of on black and white, but initial findings look like over the 8 weeks, we saved £293,000 worth of food, and 3.5 tonnes of CO2 was diverted, which is like a roughly 50% and 70% increase in what we were seeing from the start of the project to the end of the project. So those are fantastic figures, almost £300,000 worth of food saved from the bin, and 3.5 tonnes of CO2. I hasten to add that we did see an increase in food waste heroes during this period, which was not the area we were focused on. We were really trying to drive that community based sharing. So that's why it's not black and white, but I will circle back to all of you who are interested with the final stats. Next slide. Okay, so here you're looking at kind of what happened over time. So clearly that you've got the start of the project around April 1st. And what you'll see is that for our retained users, so they're people that open the app every 30 days, you can see that that's it. Everything basically goes mad in January. We love January at OLIO, but after that, you'll see it starts to flatten out. But our retained users, our new users, and our resurrected users all increased. If you remember, I said we had around 9,000 dormant users. So that bottom yellow line is resurrected. So the smallest volume came from that audience. So we didn't achieve wild success at retargeting those users. Next slide.
Lauren,
Yeah.
30-second warning for you.
Great. So here you'll see product and food split. So you'll see that product, so that is non-food items, is more readily shared. But we were super impressed and happy to see that food really increased the most. And that's the one that we find the hardest to get going. Next slide. We compared it to another top kind of performing borough in London. And you'll see that Bexley are the two bottom lines, but interestingly, food waste for the top performing borough is in red and Bexley is in yellow, and we managed to really decrease that margin there. Next slide. This is kind of some incredible stats when we compared performance in Bexley over the 8 weeks versus the UK, a London borough and a North East borough. So you can see that this effort had a really positive impact on all of the kind of engagement metrics and the number of households. STX is doorstep pickups, so that's great. Next slide. And our biggest learnings here is that we've proven in Bexley that we can move the needle. We learned a lot during that short 8-week period. We're really impressed with the increase in food versus non-food. And we've already got loads of ideas as to how to kind of optimize this. And we're really keen to work with other boroughs if they would like to. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Letitia and Lauren. Really, really interesting to hear the results and your learnings from that project. Right, so next up is Leon Arts, who is head of Felix's Kitchen at the Felix Project. The Felix Project is London's largest redistribution charity, and Leon is going to speak about their project to turn surplus food into meals in a professional kitchen. So over to you, Leon.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Rachel. So yeah, I'm head of Felix's Kitchen, which is we built and opened last year in July here in Poplar, East London. And just for those who don't know, the Kitchen is part of the Felix Project, and the Felix Project is London's largest food surplus charity. And what we do is basically we collect and get surplus food from almost 400 businesses, and you have to think, you know, Sainsbury's, Waitrose, Ocado, HelloFresh, but also lots of small businesses. There is, for example, very close to us here, a frozen vegan meal factory called All Plants, which I think are very well known, and we get their waste every day, or their surplus, sorry, not waste, because they often have, you know, bits and pieces left after they do their production runs, and then they give it to us, and it's in a meal literally a few hours after we received it. So the Felix started 6 years ago by a couple called Jane and Justin, and it's named after their son Felix. And Felix loved his food, and they want, in order to honor him as he unfortunately passed, they started the Felix Project. And they looked at, okay, you know, they knew there was a lot of surplus food because of, you know, the business they're in, and they thought, how can we help? You know, what can we do in London? And they realized that there's lots of charities doing the great work already, where food is kind of a connection between the work they do and supporting their recipients or the residents in their local community. And Jane and Justin realized that if we, you know, they saw that many charities are going to Tesco's and Sainsbury's to buy food so they could give it to their recipients or could cook meals out of it. They realized if we give them food for free, then charities don't have to do that. So they started with one van and a garage in West London, and it has grown now to 4 depots all over London and a kitchen where we have 40 vans on the road every day delivering food to charities. And last year, or 2 years ago, really, during the pandemic, we realized that if we would build a kitchen ourselves, we had 2 reasons to build a kitchen. One was that we realized we could save a lot of surplus food, which we can't give to charities for several reasons. That there's a lot of surplus food in the industry, as we call it, from meal producers, ingredient producers. I'll give you an example. A few months ago, we had a whole pallet of barbecue sauce coming to the kitchen. Now, barbecue sauce is something, you know, most of the people in food insecurity would love. And I think most of us on this call love barbecue sauce as well. But it was in 13-kilo bags. And we can't give that to any charity because it's in these big vacuum bags. So you can't, you know, use that. But in the kitchen, we were very grateful for that, because you know, it's gone already. You know, we make about 4,000 meals a day at the moment, all out of surplus food. And then to marinate chicken, for example, and cook sauces, barbecue sauce is a great addition. So the kitchen was built and opened set up to make 5,000 meals per day out of surplus food. Currently, we run between 3,500 to 4,000. So we're building up to, you know, make the kitchen really as effective as possible. And all of that is surplus food. I think we only buy less than 0.5% of the food we use in the meals. And what you have to think of, we as a charity, we always say we never pay for food, but also we never charge for it. But the only things I have budget for to buy is some spices, salt, rice, and pasta, if that's short. Those ingredients you hardly ever see in surplus. One of the reasons is that the shelf life is so long. So companies always have find a way of selling it. So, but we try to keep that to a minimum. And another reason why we built the kitchen is that we realize that a lot of people can't cook for themselves for many, many reasons. Am I already at 1 minute?
1 minute to go, Leon.
Oh, right, that goes quick. So, and as for me is another reason, you know, the quality of surplus food. And I know, you know, few people have been to the kitchen. It's truly amazing. Food can be surplus for many, many reasons. It's not that those brown salad leaves you see at the back of a supermarket, that we don't get that. We don't take anything we wouldn't eat ourselves. So the quality of the food is amazing. And what's most important is to give people nutritious and delicious food rather than just giving them a meal, because we can't take anyone's problems away. But what we can do is make them really feel good about themselves when they, you know, when you're in food insecurity. So for that 10 minutes a day that we can put a smile on their face. So it's very important that what we do is delicious. And secondly, what we're really working on at the moment is to make food, the meals culturally appropriate. We realized that during the pandemic, when many of us did amazing work and, you know, acted, you know, on during that pandemic, is that we kind of forgot that some, you know, when I give someone a delicious shepherd's pie, that, and you come from, you know, another side of the world, that might not do it for you. So we're really looking, one thing we're doing is really looking at how can we give people the food that they truly need.
Thanks very much, Leon. Really, really inspiring and important work.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming and talking to us today. So keeping on the theme of redistributing surplus food, I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Helen Innes. Helen is the project coordinator for Hubbub's Food Connect project to increase surplus food collection and redistribution in London. So Helen, over to you.
Hi, Rachel. Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen if you give me a thumbs up if everyone can see that okay, that would be great.
Yep, we can see you, Helen. We can see your slides.
Amazing. So my name's Helen Innes. I'm a creative partner and project lead at Hubbub. Hubbub are an environmental charity that promote and inspire people to make positive choices that don't impact the environment. So we believe that everyone's an environmentalist, whether we know it or not. We do this across a number of areas that include fashion, waste, homes, and I'm part of the food team. So I've been asked to come here and talk today to talk to you about a project that I've created and set up. In 2020, we piloted this project called Food Connect in Milton Keynes. I need to go back a little bit and give you some background. So since 2016, Hubbub have championed and helped community groups to set up community fridges. For those of you who don't know what a community fridge is, it's a place where people can eat and meet and primarily share food. They can be in schools, libraries, community centres, any community building that people can easily access. There are currently 290 community fridges as part of the Community Fridge Network, and this looks to expand by the end of this year to 500 with the help of Co-op. So So we listened to Community Fridge Network members, and they identified a number of different problems within their community centres and within their projects. There was a really high turnover of volunteers. The quality and quantity of the food was not always that great. The reliability of their food collections was sometimes a bit dodgy, and there's a cost implication to their volunteers for going to collect the food. But they also had concerns about the environmental impact of so many volunteer cars on the road, making single journeys. So we got our heads together and thought, how can we further reduce food waste? How can we continue to help build community resilience? And how can we improve air quality? So we come up with this idea, and in 2020, we were amazingly, during the middle of a pandemic, able to launch Food Connect Milton Keynes. It started with just 2 electric cargo bikes, an electric van, and 4 community fridge outlets. The Milton Keynes pilot is now in its 2nd year. It's been an enormous success. We've shared over 400 tonnes of food. We help over 1,000 households every week. And we do this by working in collaboration with 9 food hubs in Milton Keynes. So all of this is really positive results for our retailers, our community groups, and our end users. So given the growing community fridge network and a successful pilot in Milton Keynes, we were approached by Southwark Borough Council to launch Food Connect Southwark. So we did this in March this year. It's come at a really critical time. So we're working with Albrighton Community Centre, and at the moment they initially just have 1 van. The community centre is reopening, so the demands on their volunteers are increasing as groups return to the building. They're also faced with the rising cost of fuel, the ULEZ, and different pressures on them and their volunteers and their staff with the new demand that's come in with the influx of refugees to the area. So the early results in Southwark are really positive. The introduction of an electric van and 6 part-time jobs has meant that they've been able to already share in just 2 months over 31 tonnes of food. And what that means to them on the ground is they've saved over 900 single journeys, and that equates to around 14 tonnes of carbon relating to food and to transport. I see you, Rachel. So we've done this with the help of Southwark Borough Council, who are joint funders along with Mayor of London and Hubbub. Our aim is that Food Connect Southwark is a pilot for the rest of London. What we would like to do is test our strategies for self-sustaining, and we want to streamline our operations, and we want to scale the projects and share our results. So with all of this in mind, we want to connect with other communities and food groups that like the model. So yeah. That's Food Connect very, very quickly. I'd love to hear from anyone that is interested to help us with Food Connect. And I just want to say thank you to London. I'm absolutely delighted that our tiny little seed from Milton Keynes is being listed alongside so many other amazing people and projects in London. I'm really delighted to be here. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Helen. Amazing impact figures there coming in from your Southwark project. Fantastic work. Jean, you've been monitoring the Q&A throughout the presentation so far. What are you seeing?
Thanks, Rachel. So yeah, there was a couple of questions in the Q&A. Feel free to add some other question directly that I can take to ask to our 4 wonderful speakers. So there was Ellen, Leon, Laura, and Letitia. So first there was a question for Lauren and asking if you could tell us which borough you compared Bexley with. So the graph you had with like 4 or 5 boroughs, if I remember well.
Sure. So I can't share the exact one in this forum, but it was one of the boroughs that we started in OLIO in initially. So it's one of our kind of most solid performing, been there the longest communities. But if other kind of partners are interested and want to contact me directly, I'm sure I can share a lot more there.
Great, thank you. Then there was another question about just for the speakers, people interested in speaking to some of you. So if you're keen, like to leave your email address in the chat so people can get in touch after that. There was a question for us actually, so how we can be involved in this, or how people can be involved in this program. So I think Rachel will tell you a bit more about this, but you can register to be part of our mailing list, or also submit an application to be a demonstration project. And feel free to kind of reach out for anything else if you have some projects or things you want to tell us about. So that's perfectly fine. I then had a question for myself, for Leon and Helen. So I was kind of keen to understand what is for you the top one kind of type of or the reason why the food surplus is being wasted. So like in your experience, why is food being wasted? The first reason.
Well, you're asking both of us.
Both of you, yeah, if you can take it in turn. I don't know who wants to start. Ellen, maybe you're on screen, so.
Initially, most of the food that we're collecting is end of store food. At the end of the day, it's the food that can no longer be sold. So food that's at least it's not past its use by, or it's good to eat for 24 hours. It might be on or beyond its best before, but it can't be sold. There isn't, unless there's someone collecting this, there isn't anywhere for it to go. And so what Food Connect does is it goes to stores often at very unsociable times to collect those. So like very late at night, 10 o'clock at night when no one wants it. And the easiest thing for the store to do is put it in the bin.
Great, thanks. Leon?
Yeah, for us, that can be a number of reasons. I can't, your number one, you know, food is surplus for a number of reasons. The end of store, we collect from people like Sainsbury's and Tesco's as well, just like Helen. But, you know, it's also, we had, for example, 2 pallets of gnocchi from Waitrose a little while ago, which the labels were perfect. There was a year shelf life left on it. And there was just a mistake in the date where the November bit was printed in Italian rather than in English, and then it's surplus and they can't use it. And you know, we were very happy with that. You know, overproduction, change of weather. There's many reasons. I top of my head, I can't give you the number one. And
I'd say to give you an example, often stores further up the supply chain, they forecast what they're going to buy, and then when they don't meet that forecast, there's a surplus far higher up the supply chain. So we collect from a factory, for example, that when the supermarket doesn't buy as much as they say they're going to, they've got nowhere else for it to go. And that is actually huge volumes further up the supply chain. The end of store is just the tip of the iceberg. It is a much bigger problem, quite a long way back.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And one thing which, as you were saying, that I realized, if I have to choose, then I choose this one. It's the madness we have in this world. You know, we get so many peppers, which we love in the kitchen. They're just a tiny bit too small for the supermarkets. Cauliflowers, we get tons and tons of it as well. They're too big for the supermarket. You know, that kind of madness. You know, people are always surprised of the quality of stuff, and I think that's, for us, is number one.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what we have seen also in our research, that a lot of the food waste, as you were saying, Helen, is happening kind of the early stages of the supply chain. And what we see as well is monitoring. I mean, you said forecasting, but forecasting and monitoring are the 2 key ways to reduce food waste. So by better monitoring, you can better forecast and therefore reduce the amount of foods being wasted. So thanks for that. I know that Lauren had to leave, but I just have one question for Laetitia, and or Lauren, if you're here, you can also take it. So what do you see the power of data to tackle food waste, and how you can best harness data? So you have kind of apps and your data-oriented organization. So I was wondering if you could just take this in a couple of 1 minute each. Lauren, you want to start as you need to go? You're on mute.
Data is really crucial for OLIO. We work with a lot of data in terms of mapping out what our customers have done, and we use that to then predict what they will do and identify areas where we think there's opportunity for people to share more. A really big barrier we have is the kind of social and behavioral associations with sharing food with your neighbours. We are in a number of different countries, and we find in other countries there's a much stronger kind of social bias towards sharing leftover food and aversion to waste. Whereas in the UK, it's not something that, especially in really kind of urban areas, depending on your community, but it can really kind of shift. So we use data to understand a lot around what people are sharing and why, and then find the opportunities within that. But also with our Food Waste Hero companies as well, our partnerships with the food retailers, OLIO comes in when the charities can't distribute any more of the food. So there's a really big data question mark around how we enable all of these resources that are willing to take this surplus food. How can we make sure that they are kind of taking as much as they can, whether that's logistics or being able to forecast volunteers or staff being available. So it's getting the stores as well to be able to predict to some degree how much waste, so that the charities can better forecast, and then OLIO can also kind of sweep in and take up the rest. So data is absolutely critical to all of this.
Yeah, thanks for this, Lauren, and thanks so much for being with us today. And I saw that you have added your email address if anyone has some question for Lauren. Laetitia, if you can take it also quickly, this question around data and the power of data to tackle food waste.
Sorry, got to unmute myself. So yeah, data is a really, really important part of what Kitche does, and that's kind of the crux of what we're trying to do with the app, is not only collect data on people's food waste behaviour that can then inform the app, but also how we work with partners is we take the data and they can then inform policy, how they run campaigns. And at the moment, I think data on food waste is really, really hard to gather. So you mostly have to do compositional food waste analysis, which is very expensive. But what Kitche is trying to do, and we are doing it, is we can see what people are doing at household level. So every time they use the app, every time they put something into the app, every time they throw something away, we're collecting all that data in a database. So we're really, really trying to map and pattern and model this behavior, which is so important because at the moment it is a big question mark for everyone. And as part of how we work with our partners is we don't only share our content and the app and our platform, but we'll also share a data dashboard on what they're doing. So yeah, it can be basically used in many, many different ways, depending on what the partner's needs are. But yeah, I think this is really, really important. And we do need to find more cost-effective ways to do it, like Kitche, because at the moment it's just unaffordable for most local authorities and councils. Yeah,
no, definitely. Thanks so much. So there are some more questions, but we'll have to move to the next part of the session. So I'll ask the speakers to answer directly the question in the Q&A box. I know there was one for Lauren and one for Helen and Leon. And I'll now hand over back to Rachel to introduce the next speakers.
Many thanks, Jean. And a big thank you to all of the speakers in that first cohort, Letitia, Lauren, Leon, and Helen. Thank you for sharing your inspiring work with us today. So moving on now to our second group of speakers, both are going to be speaking about their work to upcycle surplus food. So that's the focus of these next presentations, upcycling surplus food. So first up is Rob Wilson, who works at Toastale with a fantastic job title of Chief Toaster at Toastale. Toastale is the waste-busting beer company, and they've been scaling the use of surplus bread in the brewing industry. Over to you, Rob, to tell us more about your work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'll try and do the shameless advertorial for Toast. So yeah, I'm Chief Toaster here at Toast, one of the co-founders, myself and two others. Got this started about 6 years ago. Louisa, who's an absolute expert in all things carbon impact measurement, and Tristram, who is one of the kind of original advocates for ending food waste at a global scale and making the connection between food waste and the environmental impact that's having. And over the last few years, yeah, delighted to say that we've had quite a bit of commercial success. So we brew all our beer using yesterday's bread from bakeries, taking surplus bread, using that to replace some of the malted barley or wheat in beer production. And then we pour 100% of our profits into environmental charities that are fighting waste. And yeah, we sort of shamelessly like to say we think we're the best thing since you know what. Yeah, there's a slice of surplus bread in every single one of our beers. We, I guess, do this because it's just been a very natural solution for millennia. So for thousands of years, beer has been brewed using surplus bread. It's a really straightforward process. So back in the day, before basically the Industrial Revolution, there was just this natural circular economy solution. And certainly long before the circular economy became sexier and more commonplace, and what we're talking about today, local villages where brewers were making beer would just partner up with a local baker where there was some surplus bread. And most of the alcohol industry even was born out of preserving the calorific values of food that might otherwise go to waste, whether that's fruits to make things like ciders or wines, whether it's vegetables to make things like vodka and other spirits, or whether it's beer and to use up things like surplus bread. And so what we've done quite successfully, but it turns out more by sort of accident maybe than design, is create this kind of concept or like proof of concept with Toast that is then starting to capture the imagination of other breweries. So what we have wanted to try and do is communicate this issue of food waste, to mainstream this concept of the circular economy, to open source our approach. And this recipe that I've got on the screen there, or this approach on the screen, combined with our detailed recipe for brewers to follow, and try to engage other brewers all around the world. And so far, our recipe's been downloaded nearly 100,000 times globally. That's home brewers and right up to big global scale brewers. We've collaborated with the likes of Guinness and Beavertown and others all around the world. And so over the last year or two, we then started dreaming how we could take this idea, this proof of concept, and actually achieve more impact. Because little old Toast has managed to brew about 3 million slices of surplus bread so far, but about 3 million slices of surplus bread are wasted in the UK every single day. So in 6 years, we're really only scratching the surface of what is a massive issue. 44% of all bread that's baked in the UK is wasted. It's a massive UK and global food waste issue. So we started dreaming of this concept of, could we actually produce an ingredient that we actually start supplying to other brewers? We'd collaborated with dozens of breweries, and they had got quite excited about the idea of using surplus bread, but they were less geeky and keen as us to actually get their sort of hands dirty and collate all the surplus, process it into a breadcrumb, which is what you have to do before you brew it, and then brew it up. They were kind of keen just for us to basically sort of lay it on a plate for them. And so we started thinking, okay, we need to actually produce a brewer's ingredient, which we were calling Companion, but it was just very conceptual until London came along. And so what we've now done is run a whole series of trials where we've purchased a breadcrumbing machine. We've partnered up with Warburton's and a sandwich company in London, where we're able to take their surplus bread. We've then been getting super geeky on how fine or coarse you need to crumb this bread to make it the best possible brewer's ingredient. So we've been running all sorts of different sizes of breadcrumb, which would drive most of us bananas, but we love it. And then we've been running these drying curve trials where we need to reduce the moisture content of the bread to give it its shelf life and also to perform the best in brewing. And so this gives you a sense of some of the drying curve data that we've managed to receive, where we're wanting to, in as lower energy way as possible, reduce the moisture from the bread in order to then preserve and bag up. And we're now at a stage where we're looking to take this to other breweries. And I think anyone on this call would sort of vouch for the fact that there's so much bread waste. We're never going to be taking it from the likes of the Felix Project. It's about using all of that surplus that's left over and getting into beer production, where we waste about 3 million slices of bread in the UK, in London every single day. And we drink about 3 million pints of beer in London every day. So there's this very natural solution, we think. And that's toast.
Thanks so much, Rob. Really, really interesting. And great to hear the impact that you're having there. Continuing with this theme now of upcycling surplus food, it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Alex Caiger, who's owner and executive chef at Caiger Co Catering. Alex is going to share some of the work that she's been doing to develop a zero waste menu for event catering that makes use of surplus ingredients. So Alex, over to you now for your presentation.
Hi, thank you so much. Right, I shall just, I'll wait for Rob just to stop sharing and then I will share my screen. So yes, just to introduce myself, my name's Alex and I run Caiger Co Catering. So we are a bespoke caterer based in London, and we work with, here we go. We work with a host of different clients from private to corporate, and facilitate a lot of different events that could be anything from birthday parties and celebrations through to cocktails and canapes, and everything in between. I started the business about kind of 10, 11 years ago and started running it full-time about 8 years ago. The reason I set the business up is I'm from Dorset originally and had always had a kind of great fascination with the kitchen and with cooking. And I was very, I suppose, spoiled in a way, living kind of in the countryside and knowing a huge number of producers. So when I wanted to get something, I could visit a fishmonger who went down to the dock every day, or if I wanted rapeseed oil, I could go and collect that from the farm, etc., etc. And what I really wanted to do was create a catering firm that could reproduce that in London. So kind of sustainability has essentially always been at the core of what we do. As I mentioned, we're a bespoke firm, and that means that we have the kind of ability to curate and innovate and design around the event. So people come to us with amazing briefs, and we kind of design and facilitate from there. This has kind of like pluses and minuses for sustainability. in so much as what we really wanted to be able to do was to create a zero waste menu. And you see many restaurants with zero waste menus, but for catering, it's a much harder thing to do, because in any given week we could be working with any number of clients who all want something a little bit different. And by saying we're bespoke, we're obviously opening ourselves to doing that kind of creativity and facilitating those kind of events for them. So what we'd done previously for sustainability was to use, everything in the kitchen and across all of the events. We have a very strong recycling policy, including for food waste, including for oil. We try and look at it on a kind of environmental impact, looking at kind of the event controls that we have and how we can implement sustainable events. But what we really wanted to do was to really focus on the food waste that we have. And I know we've already touched really on the fact that waste is in some ways a curious word, because actually it's not really waste at all. It's surplus. Maybe it's offcuts of the perfect product that you had to begin with. There's no reason why those offcuts can't be used. So with the help of London, we started to look at how we could implement zero waste menus in our catering business and make them as attractive, as luxury, as beautiful to our clients. We started by essentially assessing the waste that we had in the kitchen and looking at the volume, the weight, and the types of waste. We then also looked at the most popular menus that we were using on a regular basis. And what this showed was our canapé menus were the most popular. I think many reasons for this. We do have a lot of canapé events, but also canapés are often featured at the beginning or maybe in the end for desserts as well, for the kind of fine dining dinners and weddings as well. So then that threw out an interesting question. What was the waste from these actual dishes as well? So not just the waste from the kitchen, but the waste from the ingredients that were going into these dishes. And so we used that knowledge to start to recreate our canapé menu. And what we came up with was 6 conscious canapés. So you can see here in this picture, the canapés, we then had our chefs in to test them, to trial them, to go through the recipe development. And then we also did a kind of family and friends testing as well. It's quite...
Alex, this is a 30-second warning.
Perfect. What was interesting about this is we looked at some of our classics and we reappraised them, and we worked out what exactly the changes that need to happen to them to make them more sustainable, to overall reduce our waste in those dishes. And for us, this is only just the starting point. So using this knowledge now, we're working on seasonal set menus for each month, using the same processes where we use that circular knowledge across the menu and try to repurpose the items as much as possible, using techniques and methods such as fermenting, curing, preserving, and repurposing items into the canapé menu. And yeah, that's what we've done. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Alex and Rob, for a brilliant and also have to say mouth-watering presentation. I mean, I don't know how many other presentation I can do before being really hungry now. I'll just have 2 last presentation, but before that we'll go through a small Q&A session. So I have one question for you both, actually. So you were both supported by London through the Mayor of London Green New Deal Fund for Circular Pilots, who have worked quite closely with you. And I would like to ask you, what was your biggest challenge? Because I think we don't hear so often about kind of the challenge of implementing those brilliant circular pilots or pilots in general. So if you could tell something they struggle with and maybe give some tips on how you overcome those challenges. So both for Rob and you, Alex.
Yeah, sure. We can go first. I mean, ours was just a very basic challenge, actually, with hiring the right person to lead on this project. So whilst we had this concept that we wanted to start trialing and running with, there was zero capacity in our existing business because we're just in this fast growth phase. And so then hiring a new project manager to lead on this took us longer than we expected. And then the person that we initially hired ended up not working out and was only in place for a couple of weeks. And then having to go through another hiring process, realizing that just kickstarting a new project could end up taking sort of 6 months, which is just not the way that we would normally ever operate as a business where we're super fast paced. So yeah, I guess that's maybe just one very practical challenge that we actually struggled to overcome for several months.
Great. So we had someone trying to take your identity, Alex. It's our colleague Josh from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, but is Josh, not Alex.
Yeah, I saw that.
Over to you.
I'm very flattered. So I think the thing that was actually most interesting and a most interesting challenge for us was that we actually found that we needed to design things on the menu which were reflective of us and a brand, and not just sustainability and the reasons that we wanted to do it. We had to find a way to communicate with our clients that these were still luxury, delicious, amazing canapes, but that the ethos was something that they really wanted to buy into, which I think is something that we hadn't kind of fully appreciated before. You know, we'd done sustainable dishes and we'd had on things like kitchen snacks, but I don't think any of them had kind of fully encapsulated what our clients really wanted. And another thing was also like, it was interesting when the chefs were in particular, because that as much as there can be great plans for what you can do with every little bit of food waste in the kitchen, it has to be physically possible alongside the production of the events and the food. And so the methods that we were choosing for kind of storing offcuts or surplus had to be achievable within the kitchen setup, which is a large production kitchen.
Great, thank you so much for sharing those challenges kind of openly with everyone. I know there's some last question in the Q&A, but I'll ask Alex and Rob. I think there's 2 for you, Alex, and maybe 1 for you, Rob, to take those questions directly in the Q&A so we can go to our last speakers today. And over to you, Rachel, to introduce our last speakers.
Thanks, Jean, and a big thank you to Alex and Rob for sharing their inspiring work with us today. So moving on now to our 3rd and final cohort of speakers. Before we do, just a quick reminder, if you any questions that do come up during the next 2 presentations, please pop them in the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get to them in the final round of questions, which will follow the next 2 speakers. So I'm really pleased now to introduce Emma Lang. Emma is Programs Director at Impact Hub King's Cross, and Emma is leading a transformative program supporting 8 food and drink enterprises to identify and embed circular practices throughout their operations. So over to you, Emma, to tell us a bit more about what you're doing.
And a little disclaimer to start. So we are not actually a food organization ourselves, but our purpose is to support amazing initiatives like we've just heard, and businesses to either start up and grow and scale. I'm just going to share my screen here really quickly. Perfect. So, as I said, my name is Emma, and I am Programs Director at Impact Hub King's Cross. So we are a co-working space based in central London for social enterprises. And we focus specifically on supporting initiatives, innovation, entrepreneurship, and collective action in 2 main strategic areas: climate action as well as inclusion. And through that, we've developed our main vertical in food because, for obvious reason, it touches both of those in many different ways. So we've been building this vertical up for the last, I would say, 8 years or so. And we started with Food Talks, which is our quarterly event run in partnership with the Food Ethics Council, Sustain, and Caiger Co. And this is an opportunity for us to bring together thought leaders, amazing initiatives, and basically discuss challenges that we're facing in the UK food system. A few years after that, we launched Feeding the City Startup, which has been running for 5 iterations now. And this supports individuals or teams to basically refine their early stage business idea and launch it. And following that, we launched Feeding the City Accelerate. So this is looking at the next stage of support. And specifically supporting businesses to grow both their impact and their operations in lockstep. So we are really excited to be part of the Food Flagship Initiative Pioneer Project. And this year, we're going to have a circular focus to Feeding the City Accelerate. So we are going to be supporting businesses, food businesses based in London. We're going to be working with 8 for this initial pilot. And we're going to support them to identify and embed circular practices into their growth plans. So through working with food enterprises over the last 5-6 years, we know that there's a really strong appetite, pardon the food puns, there's so many great ones, for businesses to embed circularity. However, there is also a bit of trepidation around I guess, the perceived operational complexity or increased costs. And we also know that there are so many amazing resources to support SMEs to identify ways to become more circular or sustainable. So we want to operate more of kind of a niche area. So we want to work with 8 enterprises and support them to identify circular practices that are going to make them more commercially attractive and support their profitability in the long run so that they don't have to worry about this trade-off of costs and operational efficiency. So we're going to do so through supporting them through one-to-one support, a mix of expert mentoring, coaching, and then as well doing a lot of group activities so that they can learn from the other 7 ventures on the cohort. So the program is going to be run from July to November. And we're hoping that we're going to be able to capture some really amazing learnings from this one to be able to share with the wider London and then UK food sector as well, and be able to support more businesses into this transition. And then in tandem, we're also going to be working with some of the larger retailers and contract caterers to try to approach the challenge from a more systemic point of view. And so we're going to be working with them to understand how they can support more SMEs, what would they find to be commercially attractive in terms of supporting these ventures to become contract ready with them, and how they can sort of disrupt themselves. So as I mentioned, we're looking to support 8 enterprises based in London. So if we have any interested foodies out there, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You don't have to be a native circular economy food business. All you have to have is the ambitions to make some changes. Yeah, application deadline is the 19th of June, and you can find out more details on our website. I think that's it from me. Over to you, Rachel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Emma, for that. Really interesting, and really looking forward to hearing the learnings as they come out in time from your program. So now on to our last circular food innovator. So it's my pleasure to introduce Rokia Yaman, who's director at Leap Micro AD. Leap has been piloting a small-scale anaerobic digestion system on the Poplar Harker estate in London, so processing food waste from nearby residential estates and producing byproducts to support local food growing. Rokia, over to you to tell us a bit more about the work you've been doing and the impact it's had.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Let me just share my screen a second. Hold on. Okie dokie. So I've got a feeling, hang on a sec, here we go. take that down. And okay, so let me just go into share. Oops, I can't seem to find it. I can't reach the bit at the top that allows me to share the to do the full screen. Gosh. Okay, I'm going to go through it like this. Apologies, it's not gone into full screen. But basically,
is it the bottom right, Rokia?
Bottom right, not on this, and I can't seem to do it. So apologies. I'll just share it like this if that's okay. So basically, I'm introducing source. We've been modeling this zero waste food model for about 10 years. It's been incubating across 3 living labs in London. We're trying to reach basically next level sustainability by managing food waste where it's produced and using the byproducts to grow food for local consumption. We started off in, as I said, these living labs. So we tested the technology at small scale. We've been prototyping different aspects of the closed loop cycle from we were basically integrating anaerobic digestion micro scale with composting, and that's in-vessel composting, hydroponics, as well as raised bed growings. And now we're going to be integrating mushroom cultivation as well. The Food Flagship Pioneer site is at the Teviot Estate, which is in East London, but the other living lab sites are in central London. So the model that we've ended up with, if we kind of started off with it and now we've ended up with it, is kind of pretty similar. It's on site, everything's going on site and as locally as possible. So bioresources being cycled to eliminate food and waste miles where possible, and it actually, through the modeling, we found it actually delivers net negative carbon operation. So any sites that are actually producing food waste and have a need for food could be achieving this net negative cycle. And in terms of carbon savings, for every ton of food processed in this way, or food waste rather processed in this way, we're saving about 193 tons of carbon equivalent emissions. So just as sort of a visual representation, it won't necessarily look like this, but we're containerizing our equipment and adding in other modules, reusing the byproducts that come out the other end to produce these products. And we've been modeling it at a neighborhood scale. So at the Teviot Estate, which is somewhere around here, we've been looking at how much growing space there is across the whole estate, which is actually in the process of regeneration at this point. So what we're planning this year is to scale up what we're currently doing at the Teviot, from taking about 15 kilos a day to taking 150 kilos a day, and linking that with 2 other sites in East London. So one is Gainsborough Primary School, and the other one is the Canning Town Estates in Newham. So they're 3 kind of boroughs that are very close to each other. We're trying to basically demonstrate a network approach to this sort of circular food model. And each site will have growing space. So across the whole of the 3 sites, it'll be close to 1,000 square meters of growing space. And we aim to basically demonstrate an economically replicable model that can basically generate green training and employment for local people, and provide the environmental benefits that we set out to do at the beginning. So a little bit more on this kind of scale up. We're working with different partners. Cultivate London are our specialists in urban agriculture. Poplar Harker is a social housing provider. Then we're working with the London Borough of Tower Hamlets and Newham Council as well, working with different departments, so food strategy, landscaping, waste and recycling, and they've all got very the fantastic visions. Basically landscaping, they're looking at basically turning a lot of their green space into very productive and very soil healthy spaces. It's quite forward thinking what's going on there. And stakeholder engagement, we're working with an organisation called Public Works. There's some figures up here you might have noticed in the top right hand, and they're just showing that for every kind of 1 ton a day of food waste processed and 1,000 square meters of, it doesn't have to be hydroponics, but food production for local consumption, we're getting a net profit of around 176,000 and savings of about 30,000. It's very, very site specific. So these are just indicative figures, and the payback is around about 3.22 years. So we're working with suppliers. We're not doing all the technology ourselves. We've got very good suppliers in terms of hydroponics and in-vessel composting. But we do also rely on our own fabrication facilities. So which are based in Wiltshire. We're fabricating some of the more specialist bits of kit, including the anaerobic digestion and some of the interfaces and the control and monitoring systems. That's it for source. I just wanted to maybe add a couple of other points. I'm not sure if I'm out of time yet, but if not, I can just show you a few kind of extrapolations. So we've also been working alongside that with several universities, Royal Holloway being one of them, and looking to see how that circular model might translate into the university campus context. So not only would it basically manage their food waste generated, which is about 1 to 2 tons typically on an average campus a day, but it would also grow food for use in the kitchen and provide a wealth of sort of research opportunities and curriculum linked, because there's so many kind of areas that this kind of circular food model links in with, for not just for universities, but also for schools. And then we've been working also with Nigerian partners. So again, this technology and the whole model kind of links in a completely different way when you look at it from a developing country point of view. The savings are completely different, but no less kind of striking, and some of the benefits are even greater, because in some of these countries fertilizer is even more expensive than it is here. And finally, just another context again, we've been working with Malaysian partners too. So this is from the community angle, but it could be translated into more commercial applications as well. But from the community angle, we've been looking at merging the use of waste plastics with the source model, so that we can actually recover the waste plastics into infrastructure to grow food. So I'll stop there, but thank you very, very much for this opportunity.
Thanks so much, Rokia. It was really inspiring, and Emma as well. And I mean, your project is just a capsule of what circular economy for food is, right? Like growing food locally, plant-based, using waste to cycle it back, and kind of reducing waste in the first place. So really inspiring. So we just have 3 minutes, so we'll close off if that's okay for everyone. But feel free to ask questions directly in the Q&A box while Rachel is closing the event. And also we'll share the slides and the email addresses of all the speakers afterwards, so you can also continue the discussion after the event. So thank you so much to all the speakers, and I'll just hand over to Rachel to close us off. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So yeah, that brings us, unfortunately, to the end of this really interesting and inspiring event. Thank you very much to all of our speakers today for giving up your time, sharing your stories and your inspiring work with us. And thank you to everyone that joined us today. We hope that you found it as interesting as we have. If you'd like to get involved with the Food Flagship Initiative, there are two things that you can do. First of all, you can apply to become one of our recognised circular food pioneer projects, like all of in the same way that the organisations you've heard from today are all recognised as official circular food pioneer projects. And you'll see our website is on the screen. If you go to our webpage, if you go to our website, you'll find all the links and information you need to apply for that status. And the second way you can get involved with the initiative is to join our mailing list. Again, the mailing list, head to our website, relondon.gov.uk/Food Flagship Initiative. Join our mailing list to join our community of key players in London's food value chain that are working towards creating a more circular economy for food. So that's it from us. We're out of time. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed it, and a big thank you to all our speakers.